I am delighted to welcome a fellow member of the class of 1984, Stavros Lambrinidis, to the podium today. Our Amherst family was delighted with the news that we were welcoming Ambassador Lambrinidis back to DC in March of this year as the European Union Ambassador to the United States. Stavros, who came to Amherst from Greece, majored in economics and political science. With Bill Taubman, were you his advisor?
Yes.
There you go. Professor Taubman in the front row. And he then earned a law degree from Yale. He was last in DC in the 90s, practicing at Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering. He returned to Greece in 1993 and has now spent a quarter of a century representing critical issues across Europe and, in fact, the world, from human rights to trade, security, and defense. Just a handful of the roles in which he served include European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, Foreign Affairs Minister of Greece, Vice President of the European Parliament, and the Director General of the International Olympic Truth Center. With his liberal arts education in hand, Stavros has exciting initiatives and conversations in mind for his service in DC as the EU ambassador. I expect we'll get a peek into those plans with his remarks today. Please join me in welcoming the ambassador and thank him for taking on this critical role at this time. It's a pleasure to have you building such important bridges. Thank you.
Oh boy, it's so great to be here. I took my shorts off. I wore long pants. In honor of the room, I never thought I would ever be speaking here, and here I am. Betsy, thank you so much. You have been, frankly, the glue keeping us together for so many decades, so I'm grateful to you personally for also keeping me in this family, even though I've been so many thousands of miles away. I think I was probably the most popular foreign minister of Greece in this country ever. I was there in 2011 at the center of the financial crisis. And usually a foreign minister of Greece comes to the States and his staff runs around trying to get him interviews. And most people say, who? The foreign minister of Greece? Come on. In my case, everyone was calling me, but it was not, of course, to talk about foreign policy. They didn't care. They wanted to talk about economics, which wasn't my job. I learned it fast. And fundamentally, they wanted to know when Greece was going to collapse and when the euro was going to collapse and when, in fact, Europe was going to collapse, because they were more or less convinced this was going to happen. It had to. Logic dictated it. And I told everyone, I said, put your money right there. If you think Europe is going to collapse and Greece is going to collapse, just put your money there because you're going to lose it. It's not going to happen. And it didn't. But I was struck at the time by how the perception in this country, even the expectation, is that Europe, the European Union, is kind of a strange animal thing that may be good for us here in the States, maybe not, but we don't quite understand it. Well, we just had European Union elections last week. And they were quite interesting because it was one more of those moments of potential collapse of the European Union. People were predicting that Eurosceptic, extremist parties would take over, that the real cracks in the European unity a spotlight would be, shining on them, and that didn't happen again. More than 50% of the people in Europe voted. That's a huge number. Just to be able to compare with the States is a bigger number than in your midterm elections. For us, it was huge because in the past 20 years or so, participation in elections was falling, not rising. And this time, it just exploded. And it exploded for a number of reasons that I think indicate the strength of European democracy. And I'm very, very particularly proud of that. I mean, you had a situation where I think European citizens realized that we live in a very dangerous world, in a very interesting world, that the European Parliament does matter in their lives, that what we do with immigration, what we do with Brexit, what we do with the financial crisis, what we do with this administration in the States, all those things make a huge difference in the lives of citizens in countries that alone, outside of the European Union, might be much more exposed to the dangers than united. We saw a huge rise in participation, especially in Eastern European countries. That's a very important thing. Eastern Europe came in 15 years ago, and with a very different history and challenges than the rest of the European Union. And For the past few years, in fact, the majority of citizens never voted. And this time, we had a 15, 20, 25% increase in the voting rate of Eastern European countries. The sense and the feeling in Eastern European countries that they are increasingly becoming equal members of the European Union is again an indication that in the midst of all the crises, Europe is becoming stronger together. And then we have a parliament that is a very unique animal. It never, ever, ever has had one political party control it. So the biggest party in the recent history of the European Union are the Conservatives, the European People's Party. It always is first in the elections, and yet it never is anything in the parliament other than a minority party. The Social Democrats are the second party, minority. So the European Parliament is a place where no one could ever impose their view just because they have most of the seats. That meant in practice that we always have, for every single issue, from the easy ones to the toughest ones, to build coalitions. In other words, we fight all the time, but we cannot afford to be fighting in a way that splits us apart and renders us incapable of passing anything. And look at the last 4 or 5 years. In the midst of all these crises I mentioned before, trade deals. We have negotiated trade deals with over 71 countries in the world. We have opened up a market to 71 countries with approximately 45 trade deals. We are becoming supremely strong in the world in economic development and in opening up other people's markets, in supporting each other, other countries and us, in building a common, strong economic future. I contrast this a little bit, and not favorably, with what I see in the US these days, a tendency to basically look at the rest of the world as an enemy in trade. We have found it tremendously beneficial for ourselves to look at the rest of the world as a partner. Look at our borders. We have fortified them. We have a European Coast Guard now we didn't have before. The European Parliament, again, that parliament that has no majority party, that parliament that has very, very big ideological differences, managed to find the compromises to vote for it. And at the same time, we have reduced dramatically irregular migration. We have fought the human trafficking networks that are more profitable in the world today than even the drug traffickers. We have prevented ourselves at the same time from violating the human rights of those people who deserve to be in Europe, asylum seekers who are judged to deserve having that status because they are escaping terrible war and terrible danger to their lives. And we have also focused on giving money and support for growth to countries from which many people come because of economic destitution. So we are trying to address the root causes of migration as well. Look at security and defense. I'll talk about this a little bit later, so I will not focus here. We have become strategically much more integrated in Europe on that. We have worked, I'll talk about that again later also, on making the cyberspace a much less anarchical place than it has been. We have fortified our commitments and delivered on climate change. We have found that climate change is a real present danger for our planet, for us as well, but also at the same time that it is a remarkable, and that's where the future frankly is going, creator of technology and innovation and jobs, and anyone who's not on that train is going to be in a pretty bad train in a few years' time, heading for an economic crash. We have restored sound public finances. We have cut unemployment at record levels in Europe and achieved growth, not fantastic growth, but growth in the past few years. We have sanctioned Russia for its policy in Ukraine, and not an easy thing when you have 28 countries that have to decide unanimously. And yet there we are at the front lines together with our allies in the United States, making sure that Russia is contained. We have fortified our energy independence, including, again, working with our US friends in ensuring that as we are committed. I was so happy to listen to Biddy, for those of you who were here. She said by 2030 Amherst will be carbon neutral, and I think that's brilliant. We have committed that by 2050 the whole of Europe will be carbon neutral, and we're working for this through diversifying already our sources of energy. We're dealing with China, a major problem country when it comes to trade, when it comes to values, a potential ally when it comes to climate change and the environment, but we have a very strong and very clear-eyed approach towards China. Now, what do all these things say, and why am I saying them other than, to maybe appear like I'm boasting, which I'm not, because there's a tremendous amount of difficulties in Europe to resolve. I'm saying it because the fundamental point that we have taken always as being a self-evident truth, and that is being challenged sometimes today, is that a strong European Union is the absolutely best ally the United States could ever possibly have for its economy and for its security, and that a strong United States is the strongest possible and most beneficial ally Europe can have for economy and security. We have more in common with each other than either of us has with anyone else in the world. And maybe it's about time we remember this and remember why. So, in the rest of my remarks, before we go to the questions and answers, I will bring you 3 examples of why I think that is the case. The first one, economy. The biggest investor in Europe, by far, foreign direct investor, the country that makes more profits out of investment in Europe than it does for itself out of investments anywhere else in the world combined, is the United States. The United States, in Europe and because of Europe, is creating millions of jobs for people here and for people in Europe. And guess what? The biggest by far investor in the United States, multiple times more than China or any other country that is perceived as being big and strong economically, the biggest generator of jobs by far in this country is Europe and European companies. 70%, 70%, of all the foreign direct investment coming in this country, investing not just in the big east and west centers of economic power, but in the heartland of America, are European companies. The result of that, about 15 million jobs across the Atlantic every year, 8 million of those 15 million created by European companies in the United States. When someone first told me this number, I asked, why is that a big deal? 8 million jobs in a country of over 300 million people? It just sounds like we're trying to toot a horn that is really not that tootable. But it did to me. And someone said, okay, why don't you just go ask, which I did, go ask, the CEO of GM, whom I was seeing the next day, how many jobs they create in the United States. GM does, the biggest car company, right? And I asked. And I was told that the number was 125,000 jobs. So GM in this country creates 125,000 jobs. Apple in this country, the biggest technology company here and in the world, about 400,000 direct and indirect jobs. If you look at it in those terms, 8 million jobs, that's huge. That is millions of families supported by the strength of the transatlantic partnership and relationship. Would any of this happen if Europe were divided? If we didn't have this so-called single market? What is that? We got together 28 countries and we eliminated all trade barriers, all different laws. And we said to anyone in the world, certainly to American companies, you come and you set up shop in any corner of Europe, of that united now market of 550 million people, and you can trade without paying a single dollar in tariffs or in non-tariff barriers with 550 million people. Just imagine if Europe were 28 separate member states, each one with its own trade laws, own tariffs, own family leaves, own whatever you can imagine. Would that be a better Europe for the United States? For the economy, for business, for growth, for strength? Absolutely not. And yet, the remarkable thing is that somehow in this country, Europe is this big, terrible regulator, right? We are the regulators. We're the biggest deregulation experiment in the world. We eliminated 28 different jurisdictions and regulations to create one, a single one. That requires some regulation to have it. But I always found it quite amusing and interesting that everyone working for the US government is a civil servant, and everyone working for the European government in Brussels is a bureaucrat. How does that work? How does that work? I don't know. Look at the European elections and the example of democracy. We're exactly the same, frankly. We have the biggest parliament in the world, transnational parliament, directly elected by 550 million people, sending people there to make real tough decisions. We have a government called the European Commission, 28 commissioners appointed by elected presidents and prime ministers in the 28 member states, in the exact same way that your Secretary of State or Agriculture or whatever is an unelected official appointed by an elected president. There is simply no difference, and yet somehow, for some reason, in some people's minds, this is a different thing. It's not. We are a huge, strong, vibrant democracy, as you are, and we are open in our market in a way that makes a huge difference in our people's lives. Now, there is rhetoric, nevertheless, that we are unfair, that we are the worst enemy of the United States, that we are, in fact, a security threat to the US when it comes to aluminum or when it comes to importing cars. I suppose Mercedes have become tanks, which is, you know, maybe Mercedes' marketing coming back to bite it, because Mercedes, I suppose, always claimed that its cars were as strong as tanks. Well, we are now in a process of a potential trade dispute, and a not pleasant one, that could take that huge economy. We together are 50% of the world's GDP. We together make each other remarkably richer, but we could end up in a tariff fight and a tariff war that makes us very quickly much poorer, both us and you. And we're trying to avoid that. So we have a process, what is called an executive working group. President Trump and President Juncker, the European president, agreed to. And we're having very serious negotiations on a number of issues, including industrial goods. We are ready in Europe to reduce tariffs on all industrial goods, including cars, by the way, to zero, if the United States is willing to negotiate and go that way. We are, as I said, the most open economy in the world. We're willing to do it. We're ready to do it. And I hope that we can avoid the negative and we can focus on the positive. At least this is part of my job, and good luck to me. Dan Mulaney is here. I see him, class of '79. Great to see you. A leading figure of the office of the United States Trade Representative. So we once in a while bump in a room where your group is in that side and our trade group in this side, and Dan is sitting there, and I can see in his eye that he's looking at me, he's thinking, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. So in all fairness, you have the first question, Dan, if you want to answer this. Second point, values. Oh, values, kumbaya. There's Europe again. There is Europe again, talking about values. Really? I submit to you that in the past few years we are in a very clear, very strong ideological battle around the world. Everyone focuses on trade and stuff like that. We're in an ideological battle. Countries like China and Russia and others who in the past few years fundamentally were shutting themselves, violating rights and violating values right and left, and simply telling the rest of the world, don't interfere, don't talk to me, leave me alone. Sovereignty. I have my sovereignty, you have your sovereignty, so, you know, I can do whatever I want, you can do whatever you want. These countries have become much more aggressive in actually exporting the values and the practices to others. So China is no more just simply subsidizing cheap goods and exporting them around the world while shutting its market to expensive, you know, valuable goods. It's doing the same thing with ideas. It's subsidizing ideas, trying to export them, governance practices, human rights practices to others, while at the same time blocking its borders to expensive ideas. NGO laws, hitting NGOs from Europe, from the United States, claiming that they are foreign agents, dangerous for the country, in Russia, in China, are becoming prevalent. We are in an ideological battle. And I think what I would like to focus on in this particular topic, what I mentioned at the beginning, making sure cyberspace is not an anarchical space, I want to focus on privacy and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. We have these acronyms in Europe just so that no one, including Europeans, understand what we're talking about. But it's fundamentally a European law that was put in place in the past couple of years to protect privacy in the internet world and to provide data protection. Initially, when it came out, I was fighting for this back in 2009, 2008 at the European Parliament. Everyone thought that this was just, again, the crazy Europeans just, doing things and trying to regulate. Today, I'm glad to say there are 6 US senators trying to pass an equivalent regulation. There are a number of US states that are doing the same at state level. California passed its own. Does that matter? You betcha. I mean, the biggest thing now is artificial intelligence. It's coming up, 5G artificial intelligence. Who's setting the standards for all that? Who's going to do that? I mean, that's technology that is so intrusive potentially. It can look at everything, find everything in a matter of milliseconds. Facial recognition is just it's becoming an issue here. It was an issue in Europe a few years back already, and that's the most innocent part of what can happen. So in a democracy, it's always been the citizens that are supposed to monitor and judge the actions and the thoughts of their governments every day. If it turns out that the governments are the ones who monitor and judge the thoughts and the actions of their citizens every day, we're in a very different world. So who's going to be putting those values in artificial intelligence? Is it China? Because it's just moving real fast. Or is it the United States and Europe together? Because we do share values. That's where it stops being kumbaya, doesn't it? Because we do share values. Are we going to sit down in these discussions we're having on trade to talk about standards and what standards we set together, bringing some of the most brilliant scientists and minds and politicians and regulators we have across the Atlantic to discuss it? Or are we going to be fighting with each other and having the Chinese popping open bottles of champagne because we cannot get our act together to set those freedom standards for the technology of the next century? Privacy. When I started discussing this issue, there were people, governments in Europe, certainly in the US, absolutely, they want to have as much access as they can to our private information, goes without saying, right? Of course, criminals too and others, but when I first started discussing, there were people coming and saying, Mr. Lambrinidis, are you a terrorist? No. Are you a criminal? No. Then what are you concerned about? If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. To which I answered, if you have nothing to hide, you don't have a life. Get a life. We all have a bunch of absolutely legitimate things that we want. If you have nothing to hide, give me your credit card number now. Come on. Tell me who you voted for. I know it's a secret ballot, but you have nothing to hide, right? It's a ridiculous argument. We have to take back control over our data and our private lives. And if Europe has any say in this, we will. And this is a matter of values. It's a matter of who wins this battle. Finally, security and defense. Is a strong Europe there too the biggest ally the US can ever have? And the answer is yes. Look at the past 5 years. We in Europe have exploded our defense expenses by about 100 billion throughout the European Union. We are already, the 28 European Union member states, the second biggest procurer of defense and spender on defense in the world, way outpacing China and Russia and everyone else. The US is the first. But we've also never had developed a European defense industry that was efficient. So although we spend a tremendous amount of money, we do it every European member state separately, more or less, never in a coordinated fashion. One result of this, I think we have about 17 or 18 tank, battlefield armored vehicles units created in a 27 28 member states, 17. Who needs that? And how many of them are really good? How about if our people got together, our defense industry got together from our different member states and said, wait a second, this is a tremendous waste of money. It doesn't help NATO one bit, because indeed, in Europe, we don't have NATO armies and European Union armies. Every country in Europe has its own army, and that is the NATO army. The same thing. So let's get together and fix this, and we did. We developed, in the past 2 years, major programs to fundamentally research and develop together more, to produce more, and to deploy more together. And that is the kind of thing that will be extremely beneficial for the US. Now, there's been a big debate about whether or not the European Union countries that are also members of NATO should be spending 2% of their GDP, which is a NATO commitment by 2020 something, to NATO. And in fact, a number of European Union countries are spending at this stage less than 2%. The US is spending more, some EU member states more, some Europeans less. And the commitment is there. We've all committed and in fact, 100 billion in the past few years is a major contributor to our contribution. But I am concerned, I am honestly concerned when the discussion and the debate about defense focuses simply on who sells and who buys arms. And I am concerned because the defense, the security challenges of the world today are vastly different than what they were 20 or 30 years ago. Cybercrime, hybrid war, foreign terrorist fighters coming back, climate change, major security challenge, reconstructing war zones, preventing conflicts from happening, proliferation of nuclear weapons and how you reduce that. These are huge challenges that do not depend for the resolution solely or even largely on how many guns you have. Take Syria. It's destroyed. It is absolutely destroyed. There are millions of people who are internally displaced or outside of the country. These people have had for years no future. Some of them are being radicalized as we speak. What are they going to be returning to? It's got to be a political situation that guarantees their safety and avoids all the violence and the crimes and the violations under the Assad regime. There's got to be a political solution before they return back. That's diplomacy. That's not a gun. That's diplomacy. Let's say you achieve that. Where do they return to? Those of you who follow and you watch a little bit photos and pictures and images, it's destroyed. The major cities in the country are rubble. Unless you manage to build them up, unless you manage to build those homes up, unless you manage to bring clean water to the vast part of the country that doesn't have it, people will not be able to return back. And they will be stuck outside, and they will be radicalized. So is it a security challenge of the highest magnitude and order to be able to negotiate political solutions and to be able to rebuild devastated countries? You betcha. Who's counting that money as security? Today, virtually no one. Is that okay? It absolutely is not okay. It is a narrow-minded, ridiculous way of looking at security. It's a different world. It's a different world. And the European Union is the #1, by far, development aid donor in the world. And that aid is the kind of aid that builds the schools and the hospitals and the water. And it is by far the power that focuses on diplomacy to resolve problems, to prevent them even from happening. If you like, the power that always thinks of the day after, for which sometimes our policies, yours and ours, have been accused of not having the foresight to look into. So I submit to you, and let me close by this, that we ought to be adding a word before security in our international debate, and we in Europe are beginning to argue this more forcefully. The same word that we added before the word development a few years back. So a few years back, we were talking about economic development. And back in 2000, in fact, at the United Nations, everyone agreed to the Millennial Development Goals. What do we do to eradicate poverty, right? And then, 15 years later, we had the Sustainable Development Goals. You see the word coming in and changing? Sustainable. So we kind of understood when it came to development that you probably can develop if you pollute your environment, you produce cheaper goods, you don't have all these, things in place to prevent the pollution from happening. You probably can develop if you have slave labor and you have all that stuff happening, cheaper goods again. But that kind of development is the development that would shred apart the fabric of your society, so it's not okay. And we said the development has to be sustainable. In the exact same way, I submit to you, we have to begin adding the word sustainable before security. You can torture people and try to, get a confession out of them, but what you're doing in the end of the day, in addition to violating international law that everyone has agreed to, is to, in fact, very often, as U.S. Intelligence services tell us, get false information, and mostly anger and radicalize people who eventually will come and bite you. When I was in Egypt, in my human rights hat role, talking to the foreign minister, the attorney general, the defense minister, and others, I raised that issue repeatedly when it came to the 20,000 plus people, young people, they still have in jail after 2013 for the protests that happened in the country on the mere basis of their religion and vague accusations of terrorism without proof. These people, I bet you, we know this, over the past few years, in fact, have gotten radicalized even when they were not. So, sustainable security. Now, not just because the nature of conflict changes, but also because even in security, values matter. In my previous job, and now, very often, people come to me and say, Mr. Lambrinidis, we are fighting terrorism. It's serious business. And you come to us and you talk to us about human rights and human values and avoiding, torture and this, that, the other. I mean, aren't human rights a luxury in today's world? Isn't talking about values a luxury? And to that question, I always answered with another question. And my question to them was, okay, can you please tell me what's so scary about smart girls? Why did Boko Haram in Nigeria abduct 300 girls as opposed to bombing one more army barracks that they're good at? Why did the Taliban in Pakistan plant a bullet in Malala Yousafzai's head? She survived and got the Nobel Peace Prize, but when she was advocating for girls' education. Why did ISIS in Iraq abduct and kill and rape and forcefully marry hundreds of Yazidi girls? What's so scary about smart girls to terrorists? And the answer is, at least to me, it's pretty obvious. It's like smart girls tend to become educated girls, and then they tend to become empowered women. And empowered women change entirely the balance of power in any society. And the last thing the terrorists want, the last thing they want is empowered societies. They want societies with big black holes of power that they can fill in with their hatred and with their violence. Or if you want to fight terrorists, educate girls and boys. And yes, have the guns. You need them. It's not all kumbaya, okay? But you want to be serious about this business? Don't just tell me that the biggest gun wins. Look at what the terrorists hate. They're telling you with every attack. They hate empowered women. They hate freedom of expression and religion when they bombed in Paris. They hate strong institutions. They don't want them in place. They want destroyed societies that they can then play their games in. So you want to be real security-oriented, look at what they hate, and then you spend your money and your energy, and sometimes if you need your guns, to make sure that what they don't like is what you impose on yourself and on the rest of the world. Dear friends, I'm done. Let me just say, I can't even describe I'm tickled to see all my friends from '84 and so many others in this room. I am really honored. And, I was indeed a young Greek kid when I came to Amherst, and I wish I could say I had to struggle because I was this foreigner, trying to actually make it. But in fact, I can reveal now that I had it great, better than most. It's actually, it's true. It's true. I do remember it, and it's true. If I did something bad, it was very often exotic. Maybe in Greece they do go around and call each other an asshole. Maybe that's the way it works. And if I did something good, it was amazing, right? A foreigner did it. A foreigner did it. So I hope you found this speech amazing, and I'm ready to answer your questions. So, yes, back there, sir.
I was wondering what your opinion is on Ukraine joining the EU and the U.S.'s position on the entire issue of the Crimean War.
Does anyone have a piece of paper? You have one? That would be great. Okay, I took note of that. So I think someone needs to give you a microphone. Oh, you have a paper. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That's fine. Thanks a lot. Okay. I think, by the way, the only person who actually didn't fall in that exotic, amazing trap was Taubman. I think he saw me for what I was. A decent guy, but about that. Okay, so that was Ukraine. Yeah, Mark, yes. I'll be taking, yeah.
So since the Iran nuclear deal, since kind of that we've withdrawn from, okay, the Iran nuclear deal, which we since withdrew from, was China, Russia, the European Union, and the United States. The Paris Climate Accords was everybody in the world. You were talking about the digital privacy things, but you were talking about the United States and Europe trying to set it. Why wouldn't you want to include all of those countries as well in working toward that kind of a framework?
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, well, thank you very much for your speech. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to address you here as an Amherst alumnus and as an European Commission official. My name is Erdem. I'm a class of '94. I share your sentiments and views completely. I have a question concerning the issue of the far right rising and becoming a political power in Europe, and how that might affect your position as an ambassador of the European Union to the generally as an ambassador, and especially an ambassador of the EU to the US. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. Ambassador. I'm an EU citizen, and I would like to know your comment on the unanimously vote, that we now have to vote with 28 voices in one voice. What is your opinion about a new idea that's coming up to change that system? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question I have just pertains to the United Kingdom and obviously the ambiguity over which way they're going to go, and they seem to be, incredibly polarized around the issue. And what is the implication, both in terms of the paralysis of England, and then ultimately, if there is a hard exit, how does that impact the EU's ability to operate in a manner that you've articulated?
Okay, let me take these very quickly, and then we can move on a second round, if that's okay. I'm doing my own moderating, Betsy. That's okay. That's okay. Ukraine. We've managed to keep a very strong message towards Russia when it comes to Ukraine. Indeed, it is the European perspective of the country that led to this mass revolution, peaceful revolution of hope in the streets of Ukraine that eventually led to the Russian invasion of Crimea, and of course what we have since then with the eastern Ukraine. We are, as we speak, speaking again with the U.S. administration in Washington in coordinating our actions when it comes to addressing the challenge. We will not accept the illegal occupation. We will keep our pressure and our sanctions on until the diplomatic process that is in place reaches the result that we expect that it should. And we will keep sanctions in place. What we often talk to our U.S. friends about is the importance of ensuring that the collateral damage of some of the sanctions is taken into account before their unilateral decisions to announce them. In some instances, you may have very serious consequences on Europe from some sanctions that could actually then undermine the unanimity required to impose them. And it is our ability to have unanimous sanctions, all 28, that has made our joint work with the Americans and the Canadians on this issue so effective. So keep in mind that the effects on the European economy of sanctions are much stronger and more negative against Russia than they are on the US, because we do trade much more with Russia, and Russia has come out with its own counter measures that have hurt mostly and primarily European companies. And one of the things, in fact, we're talking jokingly with our American friends is when we hear that the European Union is unfair when it comes to some agricultural trade and all these things. Many people don't know that, in fact, no apples and pears are allowed to be imported from the European Union to the United States. It's in fact illegal. They are blocked from being imported. Not for any reason other than, in fact, they have been declared to be safe and fine, but the bureaucracy is not putting the signature necessary for them to come in. Now, that was not particularly okay before the crisis, but if you take a country like Poland, it produces a huge amount of apples. A big part of its economy is based on that as well. After Russia counter-sanctioned, when we hit them for the Ukraine, stopped importing Polish apples. And the fact that the Poles could not divert that export to the U.S. has made them, put them in a very, very difficult position. So we are telling our American friends here that an apple a day would keep Putin away. But it doesn't seem to be getting a lot of traction yet. I'll be trying. Now, Iran JCPOA. We are, of course, deeply disappointed the administration decided to pull out. Indeed, as you correctly pointed out, every one of the countries involved, including the United States, realized that it's okay to talk about denuclearization and the worst danger in the world is nuclear weapons and in the hands of Iran in particular, et cetera, et cetera. But unless you actually managed to take the teeth out of that business in Iran, then you were nowhere, other than just expressing, your sincere concern. And I hope that people see now, when you have discussions with North Korea and another country that in fact has developed nuclear weapons, not in vast amounts, but are there, that it's not at all easy to get a country to denuclearize. Iran was very close to developing a weapon when this agreement came in place. And the International Atomic Energy agency, has inspected it 13 times since the deal was signed, and 13 times the most extensive, the most intrusive inspection regime in the world has determined that Iran is sticking by the agreement. In other words, it really is reducing its levels of enrichment and all these things to levels that it's virtually impossible for it to develop a bomb unless at least a year and a half passes today. We used to be 1 month or 2, and many more later. Now, yes, Iran is a very, very dangerous player in the region. Iran is a country that even today engages in terrorist activities, including in Europe, and we have very strong sanctions against Iran because of that. Iran is a country with major human rights violations, and we in Europe have sanctions for human rights violations in Iran. And we also have sanctions against Iran because Iran is developing ballistic missiles. It shouldn't be. And Iran, of course, but not just Iran, other countries in the regions as well, is not the best neighborhood to be living in or around, is engaging in very dangerous activities and playing games in the broader Middle East. These are all very legitimate issues, and what we have discussed with our American friends is that we have to address them. The question is, do you address them better with an Iran that is defanged on a nuclear field, or do you address them better, or much worse, with an Iran that actually can exploit nuclear weapon capabilities? The answer to us is very clear. The JCPOA, the Agreement on Denuclearization, was never intended to be a silver bullet, in the same way that now that the administration is speaking to North Korea about its denuclearization, is not talking about human rights and other things, right? It's focusing on the nuclear issue. That is the most dangerous thing. You've got to get it over the table. We are continuing to push Iran and everything else. I was in Iran last year, a year and a half ago, conducting the first human rights dialogue with Iran, very difficult discussions, as you can imagine, on some of the most difficult topics. Well, we opened the door and were able to have that discussion, and we still are. And the country is not, breaking out in a revolution of love and peace yet, and it's probably going to take a few years, but you got to be realistic about this, at least if you're serious in politics and you don't just want to be throwing pyrotechnics out there. So right now, for example, we're in a situation that we are concerned about lifting waivers that the U.S. has on the ability of companies, including European companies, to ensure that all major nuclear reactors in Iran are permanently repurposed against nuclear activities. That is work that needs to be going on. It's not something, it's technical, it takes, and that is the kind of thing that we hope we can work with the administration here to ensure that we can continue having in place as well. Now, Iran, the Paris Agreement, from which again the administration, we regret, has announced it will pull out. It's not yet. It's going to, in theory, the end will happen in 2020. They are multilateral instruments. They are. Iran is not a multilateral. It's just 6 countries. The Paris Agreement is the whole world. Digital privacy is indeed an area in which the European Union, even though the biggest, staunchest supporter of the multilateral system, felt nevertheless that it had to go it alone initially. And we felt we had to go it alone because virtually no one else was focusing on this issue, especially as we were hoping, because that's the alliance that makes a difference, people in the United States as well, back in 2009-10 when we began having the discussion. Now things are different. And I hope, and I believe, that we will be able now to work more closely. One of my jobs is to be in Congress and to be talking to the senators right now who are discussing the U.S. legislation and to be seeing if we can help inspire each other with our experiences in having legislations that jive. It's very interesting to look at what U.S. businesses will tell you about this. U.S. businesses, initially when we announced the data protection regulation, where a number of them were quite concerned. They felt that maybe what we were announcing could be detrimental to innovation, to exchanging information, to all these things. Eventually, the vast majority, in a matter of a year and a half, turned around and are telling us that they're extremely pleased with the regulation because they realize that in fact it does not kill innovation, but it does create a level playing field. The last thing that US companies want, any company, is the uncertainty of dealing with a number of different laws in every US state or every US member state. The reason you're seeing now a Senate effort to have a US federal legislation is precisely because some of your states are beginning to have their state ones, and the specter of having 50 different states legislations drives any company crazy. That's not what you want, right? Now, the far right. Now, I was a European politician, as you heard. Now I'm the European Union ambassador, so I represent the European Union. I'm not political. I should not be political, but I can make some objective observations. And I will tell you that just looking at the votes, the populist vote in Europe in the last elections was unquestionably contained. There were a couple of countries, the UK, but there you have the Brexit debate, a very separate and very specific thing, where the Brexit party got many votes, Italy. But look at countries like France. In France, the party of Marine Le Pen came first by a very small percentage of the vote. Second is the party of the president, Emmanuel Macron. They got the same votes in the European Parliament, the same seats. But compared to 5 years ago, Marine Le Pen's party was 5 percentage points ahead. She lost a big amount. So if you look at the trend, you look at the Netherlands, the strong Eurosceptic parties in the Netherlands lost a tremendous amount of votes. You look in Spain, same thing. You look in Germany, same thing. So the numbers are about the same as they used to be in the previous parliament, about 25 to 30% of the parliament seats are dedicated to Eurosceptic parties. 75% are dedicated to parties supporting the European Union. So there, nothing has changed. This is not to say that it's business as usual in Europe. There's going to be a new commission coming in, a new president of the European Commission, a new president of the prime ministers, the European Council, a new president even of the European Parliament. We've gotten out of the darkest side of the austerity and of the financial crisis, but this has left its marks, its political fingerprints on the electorate. People are not happy in many parts of Europe that for so many years they had to deal with a lot of austerity that, yes, stabilized economies, but also created a sense of anxiety for the future. Unemployment is indeed at the lowest throughout Europe, but it is not at the lowest in some European countries, especially in the south, but not only, where it's still very high. In other places, it's gone way, way down. But dealing with the inequalities of the European project, bringing in solidarity, finding the funds to generate the growth necessary after many years of austerity, these are challenges that we will be dealing with, in addition to all the other things that I talked about. Unanimity of vote in Europe doesn't exist for many things anymore. It exists indeed for foreign policy, so when you have to do sanctions, you need unanimous decisions. But it doesn't exist after the last treaty change for many things that it existed in the past. So even the critical question of who's going to be the next president of the European Commission, that is going to be decided, if need be, with what we call qualified majority. And virtually every vote now on every issue has gone down to that. Finally, Brexit. It's very unpleasant. We didn't want it. Not a single European country wanted the UK to leave. The UK citizens voted with a very small majority to leave 3 years ago, and the UK government decided that that non-binding referendum meant that they had to actually work all together to get the UK out. As the process came nearer to that date, it became very clear to many in the UK what that meant in terms of the risks for the UK economy, for the difficulties of the trade and everything else you can imagine. It's been a very fair negotiation. The European Union is not a smorgasbord that you can just pick and choose. You're either in or you're out, but we want, and we've told the UK that even if it is out, we want the closest relationship with it than we have with any other country on any issue, whether it's trade or whether it is defense or whether it's anything else. But of course, we cannot jeopardize the unity of Ireland. And so we've also told them that there cannot be a solution unless we get to the new trade agreement that will govern us in the future. And until we get there, there cannot be a solution that there's a hard border built in Ireland, because in fact, the moment the UK leaves, its products are not European products anymore, and therefore they have to be checked. And that is what the single market is about. This is not just a stickler, little bureaucratic thing that Brussels is that Brussels is imposing on people. This is what the EU is. If you don't protect the single market, then you're nowhere. And so we want to ensure that there will not be a hard border. Where is this going to go? I don't know. It's been extended to October 31st. It is all in the hands of the United Kingdom. They have to approve the withdrawal agreement that was agreed between the UK government and Europe, and then we have to decide what the future relationship agreement is going to be. These are two different things. The second one at this stage is a political document with no legal binding power, and that determines our future relation. The first one is the divorce agreement, and that has a legal binding power. And up to now, 3 times the British Parliament has failed to approve it. But they've also failed to agree on what exactly it is that they want for the future. Because indeed, the moment we have a future agreement on how we will trade, the whole backstop, this whole thing that we have about Ireland, disappears. It's not an issue. It's in the UK hands. I hope it's resolved. We are prepared for both scenarios. We don't want the UK to leave with a soft, agreed Brexit, but it will, probably, and that's okay. We certainly don't want it to leave with a hard Brexit, because that would be very disruptive, mostly for the UK and its citizens, but also for us, but we are prepared. So I hope that we'll see where this goes. Okay, we're done. I am grateful. Thank you so much for your time.